So hey guys, welcome to another Warframe video, and today I want to revisit the Paracyst because it's been buffed with update 20. So what did they change with update 20? Well, they've increased the damage of the primary fire by 5, the range of the secondary fire, which is the harpoon that nobody really cares about, to 50 meters, which is actually kinda nice. Then they've increased the status chance of the primary and secondary fire to 30% and the crit chance of the primary fire up to 10%. And you also have to be at least mastery rank 5 now to use it. And while this may not seem like a crazy buff, it actually helps the weapon quite a bit. Now my build for the Paracyst is a little bit wonky because I used to have a Riven with a D polarity that I dissolved when I got the HEMA, and this is something I will talk about later. But anyway, I decided to go for a hybrid build since the crit chance is now 5% higher than it used to be. So I'm running Serration for more damage, Split Chamber for multi-shot, then Heavy Caliber for even more damage, and the negative accuracy isn't actually that big of a deal with this. Then I've added Point Strike and Vital Sense for crit chance and crit damage, High Voltage and Malignant Force for status chance and corrosive damage, and Primed Cryo Rounds for cold damage. And this is where the Riven used to be, and I still want to get a new Riven, and since it may have a D polarity, I don't want to remove the D just yet, and also Primed Cryo Rounds does add a nice bit of cold damage to this. And I only use this setup versus the Grineer. Versus the other factions, I'm using this one right here, which has Malignant Force and Thermite Rounds for gas damage. Now, honestly, I was kind of surprised when I took the Paracyst into today's Corpus sorties and I did all 3 of them without any issues whatsoever. It absolutely demolished everything in all 3 of the sorties. Even with the half-arsed build that's constantly proccing cold instead of gas or corrosive, this weapon does a ton of damage. The damage of the gas setup isn't that great, especially if the enemies are level 125, like you can see over here. So it's not going to be that great versus Ancients and Boilers and Moas if you're fighting the Infested. Techs if you're fighting the Corpus, especially if they keep spawning the drones, because this setup doesn't deal very well with high shields. And it's unsurprisingly a complete flop versus the heavily armored units from the Grineer faction, so Heavy Gunners, Bombards, and Napalms. But that's only versus very high level enemies. If you're just faffing around the solar chart and the enemies are sort of up to level 50, it's completely fine. And the small cannon fodder units are not a big issue whatsoever, even at very high levels, so it will still bulldoze things like Chargers for the Infested, Elite Crewmen for the Corpus, even though the Elite Crewmen aren't that much of a cannon fodder units, the weapon still kills them rather fast, and even the units that don't have too much armor from the Grineer, like Butchers, which only have 5 armor, will die incredibly fast. But the thing is, you can still use this versus high-level Grineer, you just have to swap over to the Corrosive setup, which will strip away their armor incredibly fast. Now let's talk about HEMA a little bit, because I've mentioned that as soon as I got the HEMA, I've dissolved my Riven for the Paracyst, and that's because when the HEMA first came out, the Paracyst just became a poor man's HEMA. It did more damage, it did viral damage instead of toxin, which is better in most situations, and they had about the same supportive stats. And I also think the HEMA is the main reason why the Paracyst got buffed, because at first I was kind of surprised that out of all the weapons that are kind of ass, Paracyst was the one to be buffed. But the more I thought about it, the more sense it made. Right now, I would consider the HEMA to be a side grade to the Paracyst, not a straight up upgrade. It still does 15 more damage and it does viral damage instead of toxin, but the status chance isn't as good, the crit chance is lower, the fire rate is lower, and it's not as accurate. So here's my theory, right? The HEMA is very expensive. I mean, getting the HEMA, if you don't just buy it with Platinum or you don't sneak into a clan that already has it researched, which actually still isn't very many, even though the HEMA came out quite some time ago, is very hard. It's just expensive to get. And people are complaining about how expensive it is. So what if, says One Digital Extremes developer, we buff the Paracyst so that the HEMA isn't an upgrade and it's more of a side grade? So people don't feel like they have to use the poor man's version of the HEMA until they get the real thing. I'm honestly just speculating. I'm not sure if this is what they were trying to do, but it makes a lot of sense, does it not? But anyway, the Paracyst is now better than ever. It deals really well with everything the game can throw at you. You can even take it into sorties and you'll be just fine, so I would definitely recommend you check this baby out. Especially if you have a Riven for it, because oh my goodness, this thing with a good crit Riven is gonna be a monster. And that's pretty much it for the video, so I thank you very much for watching as always, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.